It feels like we're in the first inning. We use AI in our business. We have natural language processing people on staff. We've scored 40 million pieces of news by this point. But I'll say that in my experience, none of this stuff lives up to the hype. Like the hype train is strong. It's just as strong as crypto was a year ago. And we see what happened there. So I love this stuff. I think it's really interesting. I'm not like, there are people on Twitter saying a year from now, there won't be any graphic designers, or there won't be any poem writers, or there won't be any content writers. There won't be any blog posts, because they're all just gonna be made by AI. And that's what I'm like, okay, guys, come on.
The water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
And we're live. So I think today is going to end up being pretty heavy AI-driven topics. We're going to talk about a new business idea. We'll talk about something that Flaviu found around character generation using AI. We'll talk about how you can use the new chat platform for emails and messaging. And then we'll wrap up with, how do you know a startup idea is good? How's that sound?
That sounds amazing.
All right, so let's start. So why don't you want to tell everybody, what is this Chat GPT? Like, what is this whole thing? And why do you think people are so excited about it?
This thing called transformers, which are a way of feeding AI all the data, say, all the text you get on the internet. And by having so much data in there, what the model creates is a way of querying it, and it'll just pull something that it thinks will finish that sentence. So it's often, what is the answer to this mathematical question? And it'll pull all the mathematical questions it's read through the internet, and it'll guess what the answer is. And somebody actually tested it and got a better score on the SAT than my nephew, and he's human. So nothing against him. He did his best, but that's an example I found compelling of what you can do with these models. And Stable Diffusion is one company that's done this. OpenAI is a company that Elon Musk co-founded, and now they've raised over $1 billion. And so because of, I think, the sort of new algorithm, plus a lot of data, plus the capital and infrastructure, like the actual processors getting cheaper and cheaper, that's how we have to experience it, in addition to Google, which has DeepMind, and Facebook's got other ones. So they've had this, but just used it to drive more ad sales and make money. But now it's finally coming to the masses through these other rebel companies, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think something else is that now you can have a conversation with it, right? It remembers. You can have a real chat, because before it's prompt based, like the graphic ones that were popular a month and a half ago, where you could say, make me a goat that looks like an astronaut, and then it makes all these goats that look like astronauts. But then it forgets. Like if you then say, okay, make him look like Flaviu, it has no context. It doesn't remember. And now the new ones do. And that's what makes it magical too. So let's jump into a couple of use cases. So one is, you can have so it's like a chat prompt, and it's free. Anybody could do it. It's at chat.openai.com. You sign up for a free account, and then you can just start typing. And so an example of one that I saw was, you can say, create a poem about Flaviu and Taylor, who started a podcast, and they're both business people living in New York City. And then you could tell it a prompt like that. And then about 15 seconds later, it'll create a poem. And then you could say, okay, make it rhyme. And it'll rewrite it and make the whole thing rhyme. Or you could say, make it sound like Eminem, and it'll write it as if Eminem was rapping it. And so it created this funny business idea in my head, which was, what if you could ask people some prompts about their relationship, so about their significant other and them, and then have the AI kind of generate a poem for them. So I put together some questions. I created this type form, sent it around in one of our group threads, and had it put together a few questions like, what's your name? What's your significant other's name? How did you meet? How long have you been together? What do you all like to do together? Where do you live? Do you all live together? Do you have any children, pets? Do you have any funny stories you want to share? What's your favorite thing about your significant other? So 10 questions about the relationship. And so I sent this around. So a few people filled it out, and then I fed those answers into the chat, and said, make me a poem that rhymes. And it was fantastic. Flavio, you saw a few of them. And so it got me thinking, maybe this is a business, right? Maybe you could create a business where the API does 95% of the work and you just have to get customers. So you just have to find people that want a cool poem. So I asked the Chat API, Chat GPT, what would be a good name for this business? And it came up with one name, Love's Eternal Frame, because I said it would be a poem inside of a picture frame. And instead of Love's Eternal Flame, it made it Love's Eternal Frame. And I thought, oh, that's brilliant. I'm going to go see if that's available. I bought the .com. It was. Went and created a Shopify, went on 99 Designs and started bidding out design for the poem. But I realized that I don't really have time to create another business. So it's died on the vine. But I still think that this is an idea where you could run Facebook ads, especially right now or around Valentine's Day, to say, hey, do you want a unique gift for your significant other and a custom poem designed just around you and your significant other's kind of relationship? What do you think of that idea, Flavio? And B, do you think that there's going to be all kinds of these kind of new AI-driven ideas coming about?
Yeah, I actually asked the guy I was on a call with earlier today if he would use this service to write a poem for his significant other. And he said, yeah. And does that website work right now, by the way? Or what's left to be done besides ads to get it live?
I created the type form. So the type form is just, you fill out. It needs like a real website. I use an AI logo generator to create a logo, but there's nothing really up there right now. So the Shopify is up there, but it really needs a theme. It's a classic scenario where getting to the 80% takes 4 hours, but the last 20% takes 4 years. So it's not really live. Also, there's like a pricing conversation.
Just put up the type form. I'd be curious how many people, especially after this episode, put it in. If you just put the type form up and see how many people actually take the time to complete it.
All right. Okay, fine. I'll redirect the website. So after this goes live, I'll make loveseternalframe.com, go to the type form, and let's see if anybody's interested. And
yeah.
Maybe that's a better way of doing it. I love it.
Oh, absolutely.
One other question, since we're in the ideating, what would you charge for this? There's a little bit of human work, right? Like the AI is not perfect. It spits out a poem. You've seen some. It spits out a poem it needs a little bit of massaging. $40. What do they get? Do they get an actual framed? What's the deliverable?
No, $40 is just the poem. For the frame thing, that's an upsell that now you're talking 100, or I don't know, how much does a frame, how much does that cost? 5 times whatever
how much,
it costs.
5 times whatever it costs?
To actually frame and send the actual shipping and all that.
I think it's $20 all in to frame it and ship it.
Perfect. So 100 is what I'd charge for that. But I think you should have because I'd do it, honestly, I'd do it right now for the $40 just to get the poem. Because I might handwrite it. Not everybody's into the frame. That almost looks too prepared. Actually, that was one concern that Buddy had, is that looks like he's never written a poem. So I wouldn't even know where to start. So if he does present a poem to a significant other, she'd know that there's no way he made it. That's never happened before. But it'll still be an interesting conversation. Look, I'm reading a book right now about AI. The book is actually AI generated. Wait,
it's a book about AI generated by AI?
Yeah, the book is more about the meaning of life and tips, but it's AI written and human edited. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. But I really think, as I was reading that, there's actually quite significant like mental health conversations, inspiration that comes to it. Because you'd think first AI couldn't do that, but I think it's really interesting that all the things we thought AI was going to do, like they'd be like this evil machine and calculate everything precisely and know things way more exact than humans do before they do and take it over and never do anything creative, right? They would do all these automation, mathematical things, but never arts and writing and literature and mental health. And yet that proves to be exactly the opposite, right? It's starting in those areas, and actually it's not that good at doing. The thing about this is actually it's not that precise. If you ask it something that happened yesterday, like, it doesn't know. If you ask it, certain basic facts, it struggles more than it does with what I just mentioned, which is conversations about the meaning of life and what is love. And Mark Andreessen had it write a debate between a New York Times author and I think a VC about the state of democracy and moderation of content, right? Like what's happening with Twitter. And it's so interesting that AI can actually come up with stuff that is pretty intriguing. So I'm quite impressed with that piece of it.
I love it. I think that's a really interesting insight. If you asked it what was the weather yesterday, it obviously doesn't know. Not obviously, but it does not know. But if you ask it something that's much harder to do, create a Shakespeare play about this column, it'll spit it out in 20 seconds. And which is that would take a human, even if you're good at that, months. Okay, let's move on.
I have to say, there's been more talks of people writing plays in the past week that I've heard in my entire life. So I think there's definitely going to be a big boom in playwriting, and somebody's got to actually reenact that, right? Perform it.
I think to your point, I don't know a single friend of mine that's ever created a play, and I don't know a single friend of mine that's ever written a poem that I'm aware of. Yet for some reason, we're all obsessed with writing plays and poems. All right, let's talk about this AI avatar. What is it, and what do you think about it?
Hey, do you want to guess what the most popular app is in the App Store right now?
WeChat.
It's LensaAI, which is an app that you upload 20 selfies into, and it creates these, it makes you more beautiful in that it creates these AI-driven selfies of you in different dimensions. It looks like very trippy sort of backgrounds, although also more professional. And that's the top app that's really using this AI. They've had 13 million installations of the app. And by the way, when you get on the app, it like won't let you go without paying. So every one of those people had to pay or do a trial where they promised to pay in 7 days. So I just think that's incredible how this world has captivated everyone's imagination. So
how much is it?
It is $50 a year.
And so you used it. What did you think?
The top 8 apps, or the top 100 apps in the US were all AI art-related apps. Wow. It's just, this thing is capturing the imagination. Before I knew about this, I used actually another app called avatarai.me. Mark, promo equals DAD. No, I'm just kidding. So I could get a promo. But anyway, that was $40. So I mentioned $40 for the poem idea, and I uploaded. It was much more manual. It was like one of those type forms that I had to upload, and then actually didn't upload right. And then 2 days later, I was like, hey, the AI never generated my stuff. And then a person was like, oh, let me look at it. And then 5 minutes later, I had 100 photos of me in different scenarios, from like Mad Max being on like a tank trying to rip somebody's arm out, to just like in a suit and tie. So actually a confession I have to make, don't tell anybody, but actually all my profile pictures right now, like on LinkedIn and Twitter, Instagram, are all AI generated. So I'm trying to move to full AI right now.
So soon, all your tweets and all your posts will be AI generated. The face that they see will be AI generated. So what intrigues you about the kind of face stuff? And what do you think is intriguing these 20 million people in the last month?
Just looks better. We all, look at me. I don't look as good as I did yesterday or the day before, and it's not getting any better. So I think that these apps were popular before. What's interesting, there's another app called Phototune, I think, that Facetune, that actually I met the founder on an airplane once, and I was surprised at how immensely profitable it was. And all they do is tune your, you know how Zoom has a My Appearance button? Basically did that with some other stuff. I can remove backgrounds and then do a few more things, and that was a hugely profitable business. So what I find is interesting is that this was already there and popular, but I think this fascination with AI that's happened the last few months just blew it even more into the mainstream. It used to be just, I don't know, Instagram influencers that did that. I wouldn't touch up my photos per se, so ever. But with this, it's, again, captivated our imagination where we're like, hey, let's play around with this. And I think when the whole world is starting to play with something, it's just really fun for everybody. And I think it'll drive things forward faster than ever before.
Love it. Cool. So another example of kind of some use cases here, this guy Danny posted on Twitter that he created this OpenAI, this chat-driven Gmail account where his salesperson can email. The salesperson's not very good at writing really professional emails. Nice guy, but he's not great at writing professional emails. So the original text that so the AI makes it into business text. So he sends over, Sally, I am starts work at yours Monday from Dave. That's what he sent in. And then asked the OpenAI to make it into a nice business email. So again, the original text was Sally, the customer. Sally, I am start yours work Monday from Dave. And the business version that Chat AI rewrote, or OpenAI, was, Dear Sally, I hope this email finds you well. I am writing to let you know that I will be starting work with you on Monday. I am really looking forward to getting started. If you have any questions or need any help with anything, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Best wishes, Dave. I think that's amazing. Email already does this with autocomplete. I've noticed for myself that it's gotten even better recently. I use the autocomplete more now. I think it's getting smarter. I'm just amazed at some of these things.
Totally. It's only the reason I use Superhuman for my email on the computer, but my buddy said, why don't you use it on your phone? It is great, but it doesn't have that feature of autocomplete, which is why I use Gmail, the Gmail app still, because it does autocomplete your email so much better. So I think it's to my point that Google already has the technology and they were using it to create a competitive advantage. But now for the first time, hey, wait a second, we can have the same technology too, and we're not Google. And I think this is going to spark a lot of companies. Although what I'm concerned is like, what's a commodity here, right? If I get how Chat GPT makes money because as an API, they can charge a few cents and they have a name recognition. But for you and me, even for the Poem app, right? Let's say that's super successful and all our followers do it, but then the next person can do it too. Like, where's the competitive moat in this new world?
Yeah, is it the execution or in doing the prompts? Also, I think there's a little bit of hyperbole. Do you remember in 2010 how we were 2 years away from fully self-driving cars? Do you remember how in 2018 we were 5 years away from fully autonomous AI and the robots were taking over everything? I mean, we go through these cycles where we get super excited about this stuff, and it feels like we're in one right now. Crypto was going to take over the world a year and a half ago, and now people are going to prison. It feels a little bit like it's having this big boom and bust, right?
Yeah, I disagree. I do think that this is for real. I buy the hype, and I think the competitive moat will come from mixing in proprietary data with the available ones. For example, in my world, in healthcare, you can imagine we have prescriptions informations and data health records for people, disease history. And so once we sprinkle that into the AI text generation or even summarization that gets better at that, I see it be better, for instance, at forecasting if someone's going to go to the hospital next month than all of our algorithms that we have right now, which have failed. I think, look, for example, I think this transformer, I mentioned AI moving to transformers. I think it's really powerful because it's solved a lot of problems that previous AI really struggled. One of which, natural language processing and translation, where since the 60s or 70s, people try to first use grammar and teach it all the grammar rules. And that didn't work because there's so many freaking exceptions to how we talk to those rules that it wasn't very good. Then they built these other neural networks and models, and that got better. But I think with this latest one, what we've learned is if you just throw it enough huge data, and this transformer model seems to perform better than any others. And by the way, nobody knows exactly why. We know how it works, the model, how we build it, but no one truly knows why is it better at generating this than it was before. We're just like, great, we chanced upon this model in a paper, I think it was like 6 years ago, that some AI researchers built this transformers, and now we're leveraging that. And I think, again, you couple that with some of this proprietary data. Now, okay, everybody has the algorithm, but only I have the, say, radiology images for 1 million patients, like, say, United Healthcare does, our competitor. I can see that being super, super powerful if these companies can leverage it. I think your point is really valid around execution, that a lot of these big companies probably don't even realize it, and it's going to take them 5 or 10 years to get on board. And by then, a smaller company could get enough radiology images to stand out and make a bigger impact before the bear awakens.
Yeah, it feels like we're in the first inning. We use AI in our business. We have natural language processing people on staff. I'm amazed at the difference now versus a year ago. It's quite good. It's quite interesting. We've scored 40 million pieces of news by this point. We score tons of it every single day for companies all over the world. And it gets better, but I'll say that in my experience, none of this stuff lives up to the hype. Like the hype train is strong. It's just as strong as crypto was a year ago. And we see what happened there. So I love this stuff. I think it's really interesting. I'm not like, there are people on Twitter saying a year from now, there won't be any graphic designers, or there won't be any poem writers, or there won't be any content writers. There won't be any blog posts, because they're all just going to be made by AI. And that's what I'm like, okay, guys, come on. There's still going to be content writers a year from now. I feel very confident saying that. Yeah, the Poem Writer Union are going to shut down Chat GPT. Now, my only other thought on this is that I wonder, okay, to your point around United Healthcare and radiology or x-rays or whatnot, I wonder if it creates this where people will end up getting exclusions, where they're like, hey, I'm United Healthcare and I'm going to pay $100 million for this data set, or for exclusion, so nobody else has access to this kind of open technology or the ability, or do that in so many other areas of business. And right now this feels very open. It's in the very early days, but if you start getting things locked down like that, I wonder how it changes the trajectory.
That's such a good point, because I think the cat's out of the bag now. Everybody has the technology. Great, we can use it. But and it seems like things are more open, but I would argue that they're actually not. And I started doing more and more deep research into the AI world, and while some parts are really open, like the models they're talking about, some parts are actually really closed, like getting data that's useful, even advancing some of the projects around natural language understanding and face recognition. I was working on an app for that over Thanksgiving, and the maintainer for that app is gone. He hasn't worked there 4 years. He's off the map. He's probably working at some private company, and now nobody's maintaining that project, because I think there's such a rush to scoop everything. So like, I have my own competitive advantage at my big company or small company, that even though it seems like things are more open and they're coming, I would argue actually things are getting more closed, because people are realizing, shit, what is my competitive advantage in this world? So I'm just going to shut down everything. If I was going to share data before with like you in the spirit of interoperability, I think the pendulum's going to swing the other way, where people are not going to want to share data, because it'll be their last competitive advantage remaining.
All right, let's move on to the final topic. How do you know a startup idea is good?
Let me just set it up. Palmer from our audience sent in this question, which asked, how did we go about our startup ideas? Did we have an idea and then went out and, okay, great, how do I build this and how do I go about it? Or were we doing something else like he's currently doing, and then some epiphany happened? You're like, hey, we started this. And then I thought it was relevant to go into a little deeper and share, okay, idea is one thing, but then how do you know if it's a good one? So go ahead.
Yeah, so I sold my last business 2018. I did not have an idea of what I wanted to do next. I did, but I was exploring and looking, and I remember that my last name's Trusty. I had this idea. One of my former clients told me, you should go into the forklift tire business. And I was like, okay. So I started doing research on forklift tires, and something came to me where the name Trusty Tires was just, it had a good ring to it. So I bought trustytires.com. I started telling people I was going to start this tire company. I said it to 5 people, and then all of a sudden, all of my friends had heard it. Hey, how's Trusty Tires going? How's Trusty Tires? And
it's a catchy name.
It's a catchy name. I still think it is. If anybody in the audience wants to launch a tire business, I'm happy to go in on it. I think that, but the downside is that there's really only one manufacturer for these specific types of tires, that the guy who gave me this idea, that there's only one. It was in Tennessee. They didn't want to do a joint venture with me. I was just some schmuck that they had never heard of. It's a very insular industry, right? There's not a ton of everybody knows each other. And so that business, or that idea, never really became a business, died. And why? It was because I think it was an interesting idea, certainly a great name, but not like the skills that I bring to the table aren't what's needed to get a business like that working. Like, what you need to make that business work is relationships. You need to have been in the tire business a long time. You need to know other manufacturers of forklifts, and you had to have really been in the forklift business a long time. And my skills around sales and marketing and how to lead generation, it's not valuable there. And so I think that to the initial question, how do I figure out something that I'm going to do, what kind of business. I think it starts with, am I interested in it? But number two, it's how can I provide value? Like, where's the leverage that I can provide? I'm good at sales, but I'm really only good at a specific type of sales. Like, I'm good at kind of business to business sales. You wouldn't want me selling you personal insurance. That's not the kind of sales I do. And then I'm good at marketing and outbound email and things like that, generating leads, generating excitement. I know those things, but that doesn't apply to every business. And if I had a potential business partner who already had those skills, then I'm not helpful, because you can't have two people who have the same skill set running a business. That's just a disaster. The last thing I'll say is that my two co-founders in this company, in Signal Insights, they have very different skill sets than me. We have some overlap, but in reality, we all do very different things. We're all really good at it. And that's what makes, in my experience, a great partnership is complementary skills, not two great salespeople going to town or two great ops people. So that would be my answer. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. I think there's three things that should be considered in starting a business. Number one approach, you know Mitch Hedberg, the comedian?
Yeah, he's dead.
Yeah, he was funny when he was
He was really
alive.
funny, yeah.
And one of his jokes was that if he's in the shower and he thinks of a really good joke, but he doesn't have a pen, his pen's too far, so he just convinces himself that whatever he was thinking of wasn't actually funny. And I think of that as a sort of an idea in the startup world, in that it really needs to be an idea that gets you to turn off the shower, go get the pen and write it down, right? And in other words, really go and do that extra effort and go out of your way. Well, people often talk, you can't stop thinking about it. You're just obsessed with that thing. So that's number one. Two, I always research the other companies in this space. There's always companies in this space. If you think you have an idea that no one else has thought of, you're just not good at Googling. I think that you get those companies, I get those companies, and I look at them and I say, hey, how much money have they raised, right, on Crunchbase or PitchBook? And then what do I think of them? Have they missed something that I think is so key to the idea that all of them are somehow not really addressing or missing? Or I look at them like, wow, I'm really jealous. I wish I had started this company. This is a great company. I wish I'd started. In which case, it's too late. I shouldn't do it. They've already done it, and there's no way I can do it. And then third, I'd agree with you that it's more about embarking on a partnership with a person than it is honestly about the idea. So in my case, I knew I wanted to start something. Actually, the first idea was SurveyMonkey, but donating to charity. When you took a survey, so if Avis sent you a survey after you rented a car, and like, hey, thanks for renting with Avis, tell us about your experience. I'll donate $1 to a charity of your choice if you take the survey. I'm like, oh, that's so nice. You complete it, and then you donate to charity of your choice. It was really great to get the charities on board, but Avis was okay donating tens of thousands of dollars to charity for every survey they sent out. So that was a bad idea. And I didn't have a co-founder, and that was very sad and depressing. And at a Python meetup, I met Matt, who's a pharmacist and a Python engineer, and I knew nothing. I knew zero about pharmacy or healthcare, but I thought he was really interesting, and the more I learned about the space, the more intrigued I was. And so that is how I said, hey, let's start a company. Really, I would say the number one reason for me was just to work with Matt, because he just seemed so interesting. And then over time, it grew on me where I became obsessed with healthcare, to the point that actually he became more a technology guy and I became more obsessed with healthcare. And even at 2 years in, we were like, hey, healthcare sucks. We should rebuild it from scratch. Why don't we start a health insurance company? And for a number of good reasons, it was like, no, that's a bad idea. We're a tech company. But to my first criteria, it was the kind of thing that just won't go away. And then a year later, I'd be like, hey, what if I write a blog post about how to start a health insurance company, and then maybe somebody else would do it? So I wrote this blog post and published it, and even hired consultants to get all that. And we spent money to create a guide to how to start an insurance business, hoping that somebody else would do it, knowing that we wouldn't. And then another year would go by, and people read the blog post, and be like, hey, what happened to that? And again, years go by until eventually Josh, my current co-founder, said, hey, we should just do it. He was a person that believed enough that together we jumped in and took on that large. And I'd say another big piece with choosing a co-founder, where I disagree with you a bit, I think early on it's very nice to have complementary skills. I think later on in the business, it's actually more important to have long-term vision alignment. So what in the early days doesn't matter, because they're like, would you sell for 10 million, or would you want to grow it to $1 billion? Or would you see this as a huge company going public, or do you see this more as a kind of a small thing chugging along? In the early days, I remember, it doesn't matter, we just got to survive for another day. So who cares what we're going to do in 5 years or 10 years. But when you do go 5 years down the road, assuming you do survive, those questions become really important. And I think what's in my case, and with Josh, I feel like we have that long-term alignment to be able to, even though maybe day-to-day we overlap a bit, we have similar complementary skills, we both would say the same thing in meetings, we're like, almost we don't need to be in the same meeting because we'll be the same thing. But to think, that's duplication of work, I think it's actually really important to have a co-founder that does reinforce that, and you are on the same page on the long term, even when you overlap data.
We'll agree to disagree. Agree on the long-term vision. One other quick point on the partners is that in my experience, I've had partners in every business I've had, and in my experience, like the Trusty Tires, I didn't have a partner, right? I couldn't find a good partner for it. This business was actually originally called Trusty Insights. I knew I didn't want to keep it as Trusty Insights, but it was a placeholder name, and I was pitching the idea to people to see if somebody would come on board, because that was really important to me. If I can't convince a co-founder to come on board, I have no chance of convincing clients to come on board. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's my opinion, that it starts with a partnership. If I can't convince a partner to dedicate their professional life to this like I am, then there's no hope of convincing somebody to give me money as a service. But
another company I helped co-found called Aventi Health, that was the case where this person had the idea but was looking for a little extra support financially, technologically, and I think just a partnership. And once those blockers were cleared, this person was able to really focus on that business and honestly enjoy working and growing it.
Anything else on the other final thoughts on how do you know a startup idea is good? Have you had ideas that you shot down other than the survey idea? Were there others that you really liked or that you thought were good, but you ended up
I have a list of like 40 ideas right now. And every day I have to shut down 20 ideas just to get through the day. I wish I could just give it to somebody and just hey, go do them. Go raise money, go get it done. So yeah, I think this happens all the time. The hard part, I see people really overanalyzing ideas a lot too. So you think, like what I said about organizing companies and creating lists and meeting with people, I think a lot of people get stuck in that process. Oh, I'm still analyzing, I'm still really assessing. I think at the end of the day, there is a leap of uncertainty that one has to make with limited information. And so one has to be comfortable doing that. It just seems like startup world is all about making decisions very rapidly with information that you could have more of if you would wait, but you got to make it now with less information. So you're constantly having to make those bad decisions that could be better if you just waited, but there's not enough time, because if you wait for whatever reason, that opportunity, that business, it won't grow, it won't be around. So if I take one advice for folks is to make those bad decisions, move quickly, and be comfortable in that chaotic environment.
Yeah, I agree. The only last thing I'd say is that money talks. People will tell you all day, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, you should do that. And in this business, I knew it was serious when my largest client, my last business, said, I'll sign a PO, pay for that. The product wasn't even a real thing. It was just some sketches. And they looked at it and said, we'll buy that. And I think that's very different than somebody saying, you should go do that, Flaviu. That's a cool idea for you. Money talks. And really, I don't listen to someone's opinion in that way, in that startup phase, unless they're willing to give me money. If you're willing to give me money or a commitment for money, then great, then let's talk. And if we can't get it, then it's not a business.
And money talks, I'd say, not only in sales, but even in the partnership and co-founder investor level. So for example, like I mentioned with Troy, Josh was willing to invest his own personal funds immediately, and that signaled to me that, hey, if this person's willing to put their hard-earned cash, that's a very serious commitment than just any words you could say of support. And same with investors. And I'll even speak when I invested in Aventi Health, I think that signaled a commitment to that co-founder, saying, hey, this is somebody putting a significant amount of stake here, and that gives it a weight, a seriousness. It starts feeling like, I remember when it happened for me, I felt like, okay, this is a job now, right? There's money floating around. Time is going, expenses are being made. I really felt the pressure more than ever before once money was in the account.
All right. Anything else?
I think it's a wrap.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flaviu. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down.